Welcome to Walk Talk, the Faith in Motion podcast, where two regular guys talk about their walk with Christ. We're not pastors, we're not priests, just passionate followers of Jesus, here to give an account of the hope that lies within us. We don't shy away from the tough topics or the challenging scriptures. We just share our faith, and we hope that you find it helpful. We're your hosts, Randy Dupree and PJ Verdon. Thanks for joining us today.
All right, and here we are back with another episode of the Walk Talk with your hosts, Randy Dupree and PJ Verdon. How's it going today, brother?
Good, brother. How are you, man?
Oh man, I'm hanging in there. It has been one heck of a week. If I'm being honest with you, it's been tough.
I hear that, man.
I will say spiritual warfare is real.
Super real, and I think it's probably a result of whenever you do things like this and you start exposing it and bringing it to light, man. It's a spiritual warfare. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, man. It's real.
It is real, and it's so easy to forget that. Like you said, we do wrestle against principalities and powers and high places, and it isn't always against flesh and blood, although sometimes it is and sometimes it's both. But it's
Right.
so easy to forget that. We had a conversation not too long ago where, you know me, I default to is there like a practical reason for why something's happening when there's audio issues and things sound distorted, while
Yeah.
other people might be quick to say, hey, those are demons that are messing things up. I'm like, I think there might be something in the AI settings, or something in the feedback loop between the microphone and the speakers that's causing something. I try to find the practical reason, and
Yes.
it's easy to forget that even though there are practical reasons, there is a spiritual war that's happening.
100%. And I mean, I think it's fair to say that kind of like you noted a little while ago. Sometimes it's could be both. You know what I mean? It could be one or the other, or sometimes it could be both, man.
Yeah,
Um, so, but yeah, and I mean, dude, I mean, you have to think about the context of our last episode and some of the things
right.
that were brought to light, man. I mean, it's so I mean, don't get me wrong, we know scripturally, it says that the battle is already won, but or also no weapon formed against us will prosper, but that doesn't mean it won't form, and that
Right.
doesn't mean that we won't have to battle, man. So
That's right. Just because the battle's already won doesn't mean that we won't be fighting in it still. Right?
absolutely.
We
Yeah.
still have to fight battles even if they've been won. And you're right. Last episode, so for anyone who maybe is not up to speed, our last episode, we, had our first guest. We
Yep.
interviewed Gina, who talked all about how she, went from the occult to Christ, and how she, left a very dark world and, stirred up a lot. And I believe that, just that conversation and just giving her the airtime and just us talking about it stirred up even more. And I feel
Absolutely.
like that's been a battle that's been ongoing this week.
Yeah. And I mean, it's one of those things, man. It was an awesome conversation. It was, I feel like for our first episode with the guest, it was awesome. I enjoyed the episode. I love hearing people's testimonies. I do believe that, they're powerful, and, hers was, had a very unique twist, coming from the occult world. And like we've talked about before, seeing the influx of people who are coming out of those strongholds, out of that culture, and
Right.
coming to Christ. And man, I do hope that that people found it helpful and inspirational, as I did. But I will tell you this, definitely wanted to give her all the time that we could, to share her testimony and her heart with people. But man, there was a lot of things for me that it brought up that I was like, man,
Yeah.
there's some similarities in stories and experiences, but I kind of just wanted to hold on to that, uh,
And, and
let
I
her
felt
talk.
and I felt the same way. There was tons of things that she said that made me think of, my own stories, from my past, and some of them, you're aware of, and I think it's worth discussing. But yeah, I wanted to give her time to talk about it. But looking back over this past week, and I'll just say, just keep me in prayer, man, because without getting into all the details and the specifics, I definitely, it's been a struggle this week. I've definitely been, fighting a spiritual battle. And, not only that, but if you look at, some of the comments that some of our shorts and our clips have been getting, I would say we've gotten more engagement than ever before. And yeah, even in our comments, there have been a lot of, I would say you could see that there's like a spiritual battle that's happening even there as well, with some of the comments that people are leaving. Some not so nice comments, some negative comments, some disbelief, all sorts of different things that people are saying. At the end of the day, I'm happy for the engagement and happy to, drive conversation, but it's just obvious that yeah, there is, a spiritual component here, and there is an attack. And the saying, right? Like, you only get shot at when you're over the target. You don't get flack when you're when you're off in left field. It's only when you're over the target that you start to catch flack, and we are catching flack.
Absolutely, man. But I mean, not to say we picked the fight, but people don't like being exposed, man. The things that people are whispering about in back alleys, and bringing that spiritual battle to the forefront. You know what I mean? Like, so many people think that they can escape it just by being like, "Oh, I don't believe in that. I don't mess with that. I don't." Like,
Right.
man, whether you believe in it or not, it believes in you, and it's happening all around you. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah, whether you believe it or not, it is happening. And you could either be prepared for it, and
yep,
be ready, and actually participate actively as a combatant, or you could be a victim and
yep.
be victimized by this spiritual warfare as you're being attacked, and kind of become end up sidelined where you're not even actually actively participating.
Oh,
So
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, man. But yeah, so again, good episode. Thank you to Gina for coming on and sharing her testimony with us. And I'll be honest, I that's part of the reason why I don't I don't necessarily look at all the comments. I usually wait until we'll do like a recap episode, because I mean, I know that it doesn't really matter what you're doing. There's just some people that just like to try to be negative
Right.
just for whatever reason. So I'm like, yeah, man,
Yeah.
I try not to even get involved in
I
all that.
and I usually don't look at them at all either. It's just that, I'm with you. I usually wait till we do our recaps. It's just that there's been so many that have popped up in my alerts this week, and then, like, I'll
Yeah.
see, like, just a few words in the alert, and I'm like, "Oh, well, let me see what this says," and, they've caught my attention, a little bit more this time around. But, again, at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's like we're not out here to pick a fight or start a fight or stir stuff up. But
No.
at the same time, if speaking truth and allowing people to tell their story and give their testimony stirs stuff up, then I mean, then so be it. I mean, we're not
Yep.
picking a fight, but we're also not, running away from a fight either.
Well, I mean, and there are a lot of people who find truth offensive, and that's just the nature of it. You know what I mean? And I think, the Bible, I think I want to say it's in Romans, where, it talks about how, you know, God will give people up to their own foolish thoughts or whatever,
Right.
not necessarily that's the gist of it. It's like, if you know God, you know the truth, but you still want to deny, then he's like, okay, well, go ahead with your foolish way of thinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that that's, basically what we're seeing firsthand. It's like, I mean, I don't understand how there could be so many negative comments for somebody sharing their own personal experience. Like, how are you going to tell
Right.
somebody that what she's experienced is not correct? Like, it's wild
Right.
to me. So,
It is wild. So let's get into it. So let's get even more wild here with some of the experiences that we've had, because yeah, I think for both of us, as we were hearing her tell her story, we both, had some memories stirred in our mind regarding some of
absolutely.
our own stories that you and I have experienced personally, as well as other stories that we've heard from, our family members. And look, anyone out there who's listening, you gotta understand, we're from Southern Louisiana.
Right.
It's a place where,
Evil is very prevalent around these parts, unfortunately. Yeah, it's well known for evil, you know?
it's well known for, people who practice like voodoo, for example,
Yeah.
and all sorts of like witchcraft. It's like an area that it's those sort of things are very common. And, it's also an
I would
area
say it's
where
I would say it's
go
like
ahead.
part of the culture almost,
It,
right? It's like you know, that
Yes, yes.
it just is here.
It's part of the culture, it's part
yeah,
of the history of the area.
yeah,
I mean, New Orleans was a major port where most of the slaves in the country were brought in through the US, so there's already, like, a lot of evil and wickedness, because of just that, right? And just because of the age of the place, because, I mean, when you think about it, the history of our country, like, a lot of it goes through New Orleans.
yeah.
Battles, a lot of negative things, a lot of different cultures have mixed there, where there was Haitian cultures and Catholic and Protestant and Christian and paganism and Indian tribal customs. There's like a lot that's just mixed in southern Louisiana.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty good reason why the majority of like the like scary movies and stuff like that, New Orleans is 9 times out of 10 involved in them. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah, I
there's
mean, Anne Rice has half the world convinced that vampires are real and they live in New Orleans, right?
right.
And who knows? I mean, there is like a whole culture of people who call themselves vampires that live
And
in New
drink blood.
Orleans.
Yeah, and they
And
they
actually,
legit yeah, they legit drink blood. They've had their teeth filed. Like, I mean, you go to New Orleans and you could find just about anything, anybody. I mean, there's people who, are tattooed and have body augmentations where they have horns underneath their skin or they've dyed their eyes black. I mean, there's people with split tongues that look like reptilians. I mean, you name it, you could find it in New Orleans. It's just
right,
it's just
right.
in the culture. Yeah, it's
It,
wild.
it is, it is. So one story that we kind of talked about a little bit, just to recap, because we did share a little bit in that episode, but I don't remember if you and I actually had talked about this, but and again, I'm not going to say any names, but someone so Gina had mentioned that she saw people's eyes transform into the eyes of like serpents, right?
Mhm.
And, especially right now with the UAP topic that we've been discussing and all the disclosure that's happening, there's been talk of like reptilian races, which I personally believe are demons. And it just made me think about the story that I had heard from a very close friend of ours who's, I shared a little bit about, but he said that his dad told him that no kidding, in a meeting, he saw a guy transform into what he said was a demon, but he described as basically a reptilian, lizard type of person. And I know you know who I'm talking about. And
Yeah,
his dad is the most like dry, straight,
yeah,
straight and narrow guy that you would ever meet. And for him to describe, seeing a person transform. Now, whether it was a physical transformation that took place that other people, had they been in the room, would have seen, or if it was just like a veil being pulled back from his eyes to
right,
see, what this person was really like
right.
underneath. I don't know, but I believe that whatever he described seeing, he actually did see, and he says that he saw this person transform into a lizard person.
Yeah, and so just to add context, this was 30 years ago. You know what I mean? This
Yeah,
was
it
this
was, yeah,
was
exactly 30
so
plus years ago.
so this is not like how now they're talking about the 4 different races of aliens and stuff like that. I mean, this is
Right.
way back. And mind you, yeah, whenever Randy says like this is the type of guy who like didn't mince words. Like this might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but he was the type of dude who wouldn't say it's raining cats and dogs outside because he's not that figurative. You know what I mean? He's like,
Because that would
listen,
be an exaggeration, and you
yeah,
could call him a liar because
right,
there's not actual cats and dogs, and you don't want to be
correct.
accused of lying.
Correct. So he's just very straight up. Like, I mean, it's not like I saw something that looked like this dude, had a long tongue like a lizard. No, he was talking about this dude was a reptile person. Like,
He transformed
yeah,
into a demon that had the appearance of like
of a
a reptile.
reptile. Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, and look, there's been thousands of
Well,
people who have seen things like this and reported it. This one is very close to home to us. And I
yeah,
don't believe everything that I hear, but when I hear someone say that they've seen someone's eyes transform, it just reminds me of that story.
100%. And I think, I guess, we've also had that and many other different kind of encounters with supernatural things and things, I guess, that people would consider, evil or demonic or the
Right.
occult or whatever. And so maybe that's why we having this conversation with Gina for us was like, oh no, yeah, like, and to other
Yeah.
people, I mean, I'll be honest with you, man, my wife is one of those people where she's skeptical about everything. Like
Yeah.
she has to see to believe, for the most part, not with her faith or whenever it comes to God, but like she's just very, skeptical about everything.
Yep.
But it's like, man, us on the other hand, it's like I feel like we grew up with this just kind of not even just necessarily from being from where we're from, but like, we've had family members, just to add some meat to this bone, our moms grandmother legit worshiped the devil, like
Right.
had a shrine and would,
Yep.
like it legit like was and did some evil things. And I mean, so we grew up hearing these stories, these firsthand
Yeah.
accounts, and I mean, we've lived in houses where we've experienced things, and
Yeah.
it's, it
Yeah,
it
and yeah, and I've experienced things firsthand. I've heard stories of, other siblings of ours who have seen and heard things. Um, but yeah, I mean, our mom, would be the first to admit, like you said, that her grandma worshiped the devil and she placed curses on people. And whatever you believe about curses, there is something to it. I don't know how it works. I don't claim to know how it works. Is it sending a demon to torment a person and follow them around, or is it something else? I don't know, but I know that there is something to it. I don't claim to
oh,
understand it
100%.
fully, but I do understand that it's something that actually happens, and it's not just a psychological phenomenon, because in some of these cases, like the person who was cursed didn't even know about it until after all kinds of things were happening, which, brings me to another thought that, I do believe that houses and places could legitimately, have, be haunted, quote unquote haunted, and whether
Yeah.
that's like demonic spirits or the spirits of, people. I don't want to really get into all that, but I also want to say that I definitely think people could be haunted. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's partly what happens when sometimes when a curse is placed on someone is a person. And I think personally, when a person is haunted, they're probably being followed around by some sort of demonic entities, whether it's a demon or a Nephilim or whatever it is. It's some sort of demonic, presence that's following them around and tormenting them.
Well, so I mean, to go back to the conversation with Gina, I mean, she made sure to clarify that, that they were doing spells, but they weren't hurting people, which means that
Yeah.
obviously there are spells that you can do to inflict harm on someone. And then I think about, the first place my mind goes hearing what you just said is, the Bible talks about it pretty clearly, like, people who had these unclean spirits or had to have demons cast out of them, like the things that
Mhm.
that were happening. I mean, I think that that's all it is almost like somebody basically uh utilizing something in a way that gives an evil spirit consent to, you know um be more active in somebody else's life, even though they did not, try to open any doors themselves or engage anything. I think that that's something that can be unleashed on it. And I mean, you think about the Pharisees, you know, I, it's crazy that, their argument whenever Jesus is casting demons out of people is not like, oh, he didn't really have a demon, he had a psychological. He's like, no, you're casting out demons by demons. You know what I
Right,
mean? So
right.
it's like
They
that
weren't
just goes to
denying that something was happening, they were
right.
just denying the source.
Right. So that just kind of goes to show you, that is probably pretty commonplace, and even the way,
Yeah.
it nonchalantly. I remember I don't remember where it's at in the Bible, but it talks about, Mary Magdalene who had 7 demons cast out of her, just like just like, oh, that's who it was. Mary Magdalene that had demons in her that got cast out. Yeah, that's her. Like, you know what I mean? So I mean,
Yeah.
it it kind of, gets thrown around a little bit flippantly, but I mean, so because I mean, I feel like even in today's age, we think we're so smart and there's so many things that we figured out, and this, that, the other, but there are people who are just like, oh, that's just a bunch of hocus pocus stuff,
Right,
that's
right.
not, and it's like, well, I don't know.
Well, I will tell you, one of the reasons why I became such a, strong believer in God was because I first believed in the devil. and
Mhm.
I first believed in evil, and it was partially because of my own personal experiences that made me believe there were evil forces, and therefore the devil had to be real, and therefore God had to be real. And
Right.
so I will tell you, and I don't know if I've ever shared this story with you. I think I have, but I'll share it again because it's one of the stories that came to mind to me when I was listening to Gina talk last week. But I remember, we lived in Wagaman, and I remember I had to be around 9 or 10 years old, something like that, maybe 11 at the oldest. And I just remember it was like late at night and I couldn't sleep. And I got up and I just went and sat in the living room and I just turned on the TV. And I turned on the TV and I just remember there was this really weird, like, animated, movie that was playing on the TV. I'm pretty sure it was the movie Heavy Metal. If anyone has ever seen it, it's kinda like a pornographic cartoon, but it's like I don't even know what it's about, honestly. It's called Heavy Metal. I'm pretty sure that's what was on, but it was, like, on MTV or something like that, late at night. I just turned the TV on and just sat there and just started watching TV. um, anyway, after just a few minutes, I don't think it was more than 2 or 3 minutes of sitting there, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway that, where our bedrooms were. And I got up to go see what it was, and it was one of our sisters, and I won't even say her name, but it was one of our sisters who, like me, couldn't sleep. And so she was going to the living room. And so I asked her, said, "Hey, what do you want?" And she's like, "Oh, I just need some water or something." And so I was like, "Okay, we'll get some water and then go back to bed. It's late. I don't want us to get in trouble." So she got some water, and like I went with her in the kitchen. She got some water, and then I walked with her back in the hallway and she went back to bed. And then I turned around to go back into the living room where I was just sitting and watching this movie. And as soon as I turned around and looked at the couch that I had just been sitting on, the couch had moved. It had moved like a few feet. And I remember just thinking as a kid, like, I know, like, we used to move our furniture. It seemed like we were always rearranging the living room. I mean, partly because we moved a lot, but then partly because, it seemed like there was, we were always changing things up. And so I remember
Mhm.
standing there just looking at the couch and thinking, am I just crazy? Was the couch, did we recently move it around? And that's why I'm confused as to why the couch looks like it's in a different spot. Or did the couch actually move in the time that I walked with, our sister to the kitchen and then back to her room? Did the couch move? Which it had probably only been like 2 minutes. And so, like, I remember just going and sitting on that couch and just kinda like in a daze, like, just thinking about this. And then when I looked back towards the hallway where I was just standing, like, I saw these, like, 2, like, yellowish green, like, eyes just glowing, just staring at me in
Mm.
the hallway. And, like, I was a little kid, and I freaked out because I had heard of stuff like this. I had never seen anything like this, but I swear to God, like, this is what I remember seeing, and I just freaked out. And so I started, like, yelling and crying for everybody to wake up. And I think I started turning on lights, and then, mom woke up, and I don't even remember who all was there, if all of us were home or who all was there or not. But I just remember, like, mom took it seriously. Like, she was like, "Yeah, I believe that you did probably see something." Now, look, I was 11 years old. Could it have been like I was sleepwalking or having some sort of night terror? I don't know. It very well could have been something, but at the time it was real to me. And I thought that, I really had an experience, and I still do. I don't, it could have been something else, and I'm open to that. But I also think that I actually did see something. And it wasn't just because of this instance, it was because of so many other instances that were similar that had happened to not just me, but other people in our family that made me think that I actually did see something. And I just remember, mom saying, "Look, you need to write out a prayer and just pray to God." And this was like, look, none, I would say none of us at the time were, right with God or
Right.
following Jesus. And so, mom was telling me to do the best thing that she knew for me to do, which was to write out a prayer, is what she said. And I was like, I don't even know what that even means. I don't even know what I would write. But I remember that being the thing that I was told to do. And like from that point on, like, that was just one of several experiences that I had. But that was one that really like caught me off guard because it came out of nowhere. And like I said, I just saw like I don't even remember honestly if there was like a silhouette. Like in my mind, I kind of picture just those eyes kind of floating there, but I want to say there was a hint of a shadow around them, but it was such a dark hallway I couldn't even see. It was like black on black, right? It would have been like a shadow in the dark, which is almost impossible to differentiate,
Right.
between the two, where one stops and the other starts. But I remember that instance very vividly, and I remember how I felt, which was like this crazy, like eerie, like just fearfulness that just like, exploded in me really out of nowhere. And that was it. That's really, I wrote out my prayer and that was the end of it. And I didn't see anything like that ever again. But that instance really, it really shocked me.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, uh, we've had like, so whenever we moved to Colorado, you don't remember like how many pictures we had with like little figures that you could make up. Like I remember that part that went upstairs. So like whenever you walked in from the main door, remember how there was that level and then there was a kitchen and you can either go down a level or you can go up a level. Well, those stairs like right there, like where
Which
our
which
rooms were.
house which house was that?
So whenever we lived in Widefield, whenever we first moved to
Okay, yeah,
Colorado,
yeah. I remember
right?
that one. Yeah.
So you would walk in the door and then not too far, like the stairs would go up to our rooms and stuff like that. And I remember there was a
Yeah.
picture of like a little girl peeking around that corner and stuff like that. So I mean, we used to have legitimate, and maybe mom still does, pictures of these kind of things where we didn't even realize what we had captured until after the
Right.
fact, or like it. So I will get to, I talked to mom after that episode with Gina aired, and she, oddly enough, same thing for her. She brought up a story that we had heard before, but she's like, I hadn't thought about that in years and years and years. But she's like, that's what it kind of brought back for her, made her think. So I'll get to that in a second. But I was just gonna say, man, like I remember seeing this picture myself. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I'm sure you had to have, but there's a picture uh, of mom sitting on a couch pregnant with you in her belly, and there's your face in a lamp. Like have you seen that picture? I've seen it.
Yeah, man, that's a picture I had. I haven't seen it or even thought about it in a long, long time, but I do remember seeing that picture,
So
when I was really young. Yeah.
100%. So just for all of you guys listening out there, I've legitimately, my mom had this picture of, she was, pregnant with Randy sitting on a couch, and there's a face of a baby glowing inside of like the lampshade, and it was years before Randy had to get to be like 3 or 4 years old before she was able to even tell that it was his face, because before that she didn't even recognize. She's just like, oh look, there's a little face in here, like, and it's not like some kind of blur, like it's very like you can see. I believe whenever she showed me the picture, she showed me the picture and a baby picture of Randy, and like, you know what I mean? You can see the similarities. It's crazy. And mind you, it was, she was pregnant with Randy, and the face in the picture was him at like 3 or 4 years old. So, you know,
Yeah, I remember seeing that picture. It's been a long time though. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that or remembered that, but you just reminded me of another similar story. I don't know if you ever heard the story about our papa, but he, was actually born, they say, and I don't even know exactly what this means, with two front teeth and a veil over his face,
hmm,
which I'm not even sure what that was, but in his culture, he's, was like full-blooded Indian, grew up on the reservation and everything. And like to them in their culture, that was like, uh, I don't know, it was a what is the word I'm looking for? Like an
omen,
omen.
omen,
Yeah, like
yeah.
an omen.
And just for
Um,
context for y'all listeners, papa basically means grandfather or something like that. That's, yeah, that's that's what we call
right.
it. But go ahead,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, it's similar story, just the fact that, just because, you brought up, infant, being an infant
Right,
and,
right.
papa, I remember, having something similar, with him being born kind of unusual, and I don't know what that means. I don't, if
Yeah.
anyone out there's listening, has heard of something similar and you're like, "Hey, I know exactly what this means," please let us know.
Yeah, well, and look, man, I remember, whenever I was living with my grandmother, who, she was very devout Catholic, was basically trying to, I mean, she had me going to Catholic church and all that stuff. I mean, it's again very, I guess, and I'm not even sure if it's just in the area, but it's very like second nature. Like it's not even like a question. I mean, they believe in so much of this stuff, like in the same way that they believe in God. They're just like, yep,
Right.
it is what it is. And man, I remember like, uh, I wouldn't say that, I can kind of feel like some people would say, oh, well, maybe, kids sometimes just have an active imagination. Well, I don't, like, so there was too many instances where like I would see things and I would know things that there was no other way of seeing or knowing unless I had experienced them, right?
Right.
I had a great grandmother, um, who I don't even remember remotely at all. She died whenever I was very young, I believe still a baby, and all I ever heard was that I was one of her favorite. Like she, apparently just was drawn to me. I don't remember her. Anyways, I mean, there was multiple times where I saw her, and like I would see this woman wearing like a purple nightgown by my door. Like I would catch her like watching me and I'd freak out. And I knew it wasn't my grandma because I lived with my grandma, but I didn't recognize this lady. And
Mm.
like, and I saw her multiple times and I was just like, I was afraid to even say anything about it. You know what I mean? I was just kind of
Yeah.
kept it to myself until, you know, one day I brought it up to my grandmother. I was like, listen, you know, I think, matter of fact, I think I went and asked her if I can go sleep in her room because like it just got to this point where I'm like, I feel like I keep seeing this thing. And, uh, and so I ended up telling her, I'm like, yeah, I keep seeing this lady in purple and she's, I'll catch her just watching me and whenever she sees me see her, like she leaves or like disappears, like she'll like but it wasn't just like a poof. Like she would like pull away from the door and then I'd go out there and there was nobody there kind of thing. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so she was like, oh, apparently my great grandmother, died in the room that I was staying in my grandmother's house. Whenever she had gotten sick, they were taking care of her, and yeah, the room that she passed away in was what now was my room, and I was like 7, 8 years old at this point. You know what I mean? So she had been dead for a while, and I never knew because I didn't really know her like that. But yeah, man, that I mean, there's been, and so it was just hearing these kind of things was kind of like par for the course. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think I remember you telling me that story or sharing that story, maybe with a group of us at some point. Did I ever share the story with you before that I shared earlier
no,
um about the eyes that I saw floating in the
no,
highway? No?
no,
Was that the
and yeah, that was the first I'd remember hearing
okay.
that. And actually, I thought you were gonna talk about, one of our sisters whenever she saw the Grim Reaper thing, and it remember it wanted her to go outside. I think we were staying in Mississippi at the
So
time.
so yeah, so there's a lot of stories there. So when we lived in Mississippi, and I forget, I think
Yeah, oh,
do you remember, were we in Bay St. Louis or Kiln? We were somewhere around in that
yeah.
area.
Well,
That
so that's what I wanted to ask you. Where were we living at whenever that story you just told happened?
that was in Wagaman.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, you did say
So
that.
that
Sorry. Yeah.
that was in Wagaman. So but there were lots of stories from when we lived in Mississippi. So when we lived in Mississippi, and I forget, I think we were in Kiln is where I believe we were, Kiln.
Mhm.
Um and we lived, our street was maybe, a mile long and maybe had 4 or 5 houses on the whole street, so we weren't like totally isolated, but there was lots of farms around us and lots of woods around us, and we were definitely, you know we definitely had a lot of like space and a lot of what's the best way to say it, there was just a lot of opportunity for weird stuff
Yeah.
around that area.
Yeah.
But in the house that we lived in, and I believe that house was owned by our stepdad's uncle or something like that, who was letting us live there. I personally had an experience. I know our siblings had experiences there where people saw and heard things. We even knew of our neighbor who was having experiences. But I'll start with sharing one that I had personally because it leads into, what our sister had, because and this one was a pretty minor one, but, like, I just remember, like, at the time, my bed was literally a mattress on a box spring on the floor. There was no frame, there was nothing, under the bed, there was no under the bed, no way to be scared of a ghost under the bed, because there was no under the bed.
Right, right.
And I remember just one night going and laying in bed, and just as I was about to fall asleep, the whole bed shaking, like someone just grabbed it and shook it.
Mm.
Which, how could it be shooken when it's on the floor? There's
Right, right,
nothing to shake, right? The whole house
right,
would have had to shake, but I
right.
remember it as clear as day that it shook, which, again, it's a very small minor thing. Could be a figment of my imagination if it wasn't for the fact that other things happen. So you alluded to our sister, seeing things, and I'll let you kind of explain that one, and I'll maybe chime in if I remember anything that you don't. But I do remember, one of our sisters at least, having some pretty crazy experiences.
Well, yeah, and I just remember because, she told it to me hysterically at the time, and then after he was telling other people, and I mean, it was just I'm like, Holy cow, like what is going on?" Um, and I remember mom having, I guess, a conversation with the neighbor, and them having a similar experience with one of their children. I want to say it was their daughter as well, but anyways,
Mhm. It
from
was.
what I was told by our sister is that she was sleeping on the sofa bed with our other sisters, and she got up to go get some water. Well, whenever she got up to go get some water, she was in the kitchen, and the kitchen door had like a glass, like 4 pane window in the door, and you could see outside. And she said whenever she was drinking water, that she saw what she described as what you would expect the Grim Reaper to look like, right? Black cloak over a white skeleton face, and she said that it was like motioning her like to come outside. So she said she freaked out. She bolted back to the living room, jumped back in the bed with her sisters and pulled the covers over her head. And she said she was just waiting, just in fear, just waiting there, but she was with her sisters. And she said she like peeks out from underneath the covers, and she's kind of looking around to see if it's in there. And she said she didn't see it, but she said whenever she looked up, she said the ceiling opened up of the house, and she said she can see like the stars. Like she's looking up, laying in the living room, looking up, and there's no ceiling there. She can see the stars. And she said this Grim Reaper figure was um just huge and was basically like this. And she said she felt like she was starting to lead, like go towards him. And she said she started screaming and freaking out. And then, next thing you know, like people start waking up, and they're like, "What's going on? What's going on?" And it's gone. He's gone. Ceiling's normal, and she's just freaking out. And she was like, hysterical. Mom, he wanted me to go with him. He kept saying, come with me," and this, that, the other. And then, so I remember all this happening, and then mom talking to a neighbor, and them telling mom that they've like found their daughter outside their house, like walking towards these woods, and that
Yeah.
somebody told her like, "Hey, come with me, come with me." So yeah.
Well, see, I remember that a little bit different. And maybe mom could clear it up, because I remember her saying that she saw the neighbor girl walking outside
Oh,
by
maybe. Yeah.
herself at night, and I believe she said she asked her about it after Kristen had, or after our sister had said that,
Yeah.
told us the story, right?
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, she asked the girl, and the girl kind of like shied away and was just like, basically said something to the effect of like, "He told me not to talk about it," or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but mom had actually seen the girl outside by herself, like she was with someone walking the streets at like really late at night, like the early hours of the morning.
Yeah.
So yeah, and this was a person that like we knew, that like, we played with, that like came over to our house and, was, not comfortable telling what was going on.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But in that same house, I also do remember, and I believe one of our cousins was over at the time. I remember us all just kind of hanging out, and all of a sudden, our younger siblings and our cousin come running into the living room, freaking out because someone or something was staring at them through the window. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember hearing that. Yeah.
And I remember,
Like right
like
up
us.
face to the window, right?
Yes, like a
Yeah.
face to the window. And again, like our nearest neighbor, like if in the time it took us to go outside to go and see what was going on, there's no place for them to have run to. They couldn't have got, if it was our neighbor, they could not have gotten to their house in time because the houses were spaced so far apart. There was no place for anyone to go and hide. But we went outside looking and there was nobody there. But they
Man.
swear that they saw someone with their face against the glass looking at them.
So I'll tell you this, and this is legit probably the most terrifying thing that's happened to me. And it happened to me as an adult. And I mean, to the extent that I'm pretty sure somewhere in a Facebook memory, I legit put a post that said, if something happens to me and I don't wake up, tell my kids that I love them. Like, dude, it was wild.
Wow.
So I was,
So that sounds recent then.
yeah, I mean, this was, so my oldest would have been, I think, yeah, well, my oldest would have been two or three. Yeah. So, I mean,
Okay.
this was about, 12 years ago, but I mean, I was a grown man, you know what I mean? And I was staying with my aunt. I think I want to say I just moved back down here. And so I was staying with my aunt at her house, and her house has been notorious for paranormal activity. I mean, she's had it blessed because, I believe she's Catholic, or she was Catholic at one point. Like, priests have come and blessed it. I mean, she's had people who come to put in internet, and they're like, man, like my machines are reading crazy. If I'm standing within like like in on the side of your house, like it goes crazy. If I step off, she's like, anyways, just all these things happen.
Sure,
That's
sure.
beside the point. So anyways, so you said facing the window. So I'd just gotten off work, and I'd worked nights, and so this was early in the morning, and I wasn't tired yet, right? So I was playing on my phone, and I was laying in my room, laying on my bed, playing on my phone, and I was just like, oh man, I know I need to get some sleep, and so whenever I clicked my phone off, I need to stop playing on this thing. You know how it just turns black, but it's like a reflection. So there's a window above my bed right behind me.
Oh my
and
gosh. Oh
and
my gosh.
I see this thing pressed up, like looking at me through this window, and
Oh my
in the
gosh.
reflection of my phone. So, dude, my first instinct is to throw my phone down and look behind me. And whenever I go to, I can't. I feel it push on me, like it's just got me pinned, and I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't do anything, and I was just like, I was trying so hard to get it out, and I couldn't. And I want to say that lasted for like 2 or 3 minutes, where I'm just like trying to scream and try to get off me, and I can't move. And then all of a sudden, like it let up, and dude, I freaked out. I bolted. And mind you, like I said, I was probably, dude, 30 years old, almost
Wow.
30 years old.
That's crazy.
I went sleep in the living room on the couch, and I made that Facebook message like, I don't know what just happened to me, but like I'm afraid to go to sleep. Like I don't even know if I'm gonna wake up.
Okay. All right. So you know what that reminds me of? I don't know if Papa ever told you this story, but did he ever tell you the story about Aunt Jemima?
It sounds familiar, but I
Okay,
don't
so you know Aunt
readily recall.
Jemima, like the syrup lady,
Syrup, yeah,
right? The
yeah.
syrup lady.
Mhm.
And this is how he described it to me, right? But he told me, and again, just for everyone listening, picture like he grew up like on a reservation. He lived out in the swamps, like on camps, like
Right.
no one around for miles, just dark woods with trees with moss hanging on them. He had to take a boat to school, right? He didn't even have a way to get to school other than like a ferry that took them across the bayou to school. He told me that when he was a kid, him and his siblings, if they were bad, quote unquote bad, they had a window in their living room with the couch up against the wall, with the window behind you as you sat on the couch. And when they were bad, their mom, dad, whoever made them sit on the couch. And while they were sitting on the couch, they could see in the mirror across the living room what he described as something that looked like Aunt Jemima show up behind him
Mm.
in the window. And that was their punishment
That's
for
wild.
being bad kids was they would have to sit on that couch until this thing showed up
Mm,
and basically freaked them the heck out to where they never wanted to misbehave again. And I'll
right.
be honest with you, I never knew how to take that story. Like, you hear those kind of things as a kid and it's like, okay, is this just, someone's trying to scare me straight so that I'm not bad or whatever? But it sounds very similar to what you just said. And I never heard you tell that story before. And it
Oh no.
honestly gave me goosebumps as you were telling it, because as soon as you started to, before you even said, when my phone went black, I saw the reflection, before you even said that, I knew exactly where it was going because it reminded me of Papa's story.
Yeah, dude, it was wild. Like, and there's not a whole lot of people that I told that story because it shook me. It really did, man.
Wow.
Um, and all these things, like, so I will, since I prefaced it earlier, I had a conversation with mom, and
Well, hold
so
on. Before you tell that story though, I just want to go back real quick. Can I go right back
yeah,
to
absolutely.
Mississippi? Because
Good.
so much stuff happened in Mississippi. I just wanted to just one more thing I wanted to say that happened there. So when we lived in Mississippi, I had a friend that lived down the street from us. It was probably like I don't know, a half a mile walk to his house, and he lived in an A-frame house. I will always remember he lived in an A-frame house. Don't know why that stuck out of my head. But we did this very stupid thing, which was we used to like mess around with the Ouija board, he and
Mm,
I. And some days after school, I would just get off at his bus stop and we would just hang out. Some days, I'd get off at our bus stop and I'd walk over to his house later on. This particular day, we had the Ouija board. We're talking about it on the bus and we wanted to go play with the Ouija board. So we got off the bus and we went to his house, and his parents weren't home, but he didn't have his key. For whatever reason, the dude had forgot his key. So we were going to go do the Ouija board in his house. No one was going to be around. It was just going to be him and I kind of messing with this thing. And instead, we're doing it out on his porch because he doesn't have the key to his house. So we're literally just doing it on his porch, messing around with this Ouija board. And I kid you not, man, while we were sitting on his porch messing with this Ouija board, we started hearing all kinds of noise in his house, like someone was just like tearing his house apart.
oh,
I mean, you could just, do you remember me telling you
yeah,
this?
I remember. Yeah.
And his parent, and we were freaking out. We're like, what is going on there? But it started off kind of subtle, and then it kind of
Yeah.
like increased, and then finally we got to the point where we're just like, all right, we put this thing away. We're not going to mess with this thing anymore. And then so we went. I remember we walked across the street to another friend's house, and we went and hung out with him until we saw the dude's parents get home. When we saw his parents get home, we walked back over because they had the key to let us back into the house. And so we all went into the house, and I just remember his kitchen, like all his cabinets were open, pots and pans and dishes had just been pulled out. Some of it was thrown on the floor, some of it was just like
Mm,
broken, laying on the table. Like it was just a mess. Like someone had went in there and just was like, and so the parents thought like somebody had like broken to their house and vandalized it. And we were just like, oh my gosh, like either A, someone was in there doing that while we were sitting on the porch, or B, this was something spiritual that was happening. To
mm.
this day, I don't know. Is it possible someone broke into their house and we just didn't hear them and they were looking for something? And then when we heard them, making a racket, making a mess, we got the heck out of there. Sure, that's absolutely possible. Is it also possible that we were stirring up something in the spirit world and it was manifesting itself to scare us? Well, if that's the case, it worked, because it did scare the crap out of us.
Right. Right. Yeah. I do remember you telling me that one. Yeah. Like, yeah, that's wild, man. And see, that's one thing. Like, I felt like I was very aware of Ouija boards as a kid, and what that led to, because I knew multiple people who had this, like, similar stories, I would at least say, about the things that Ouija boards opened up. And so yeah, getting back to this story with mom, and I mean, we had heard this, you know, um, story whenever we were kids, and I guess, based off of Gina kind of talking about, you know, I guess it's more along the lines of being able to shape shifts, right? Which is what I would say it appears that these reptilian people have the ability to do.
Well, and this
Um,
story that you're about to tell also took place in Wagaman, which is where I
yes,
saw my first, you know, entity that I described earlier. Just a
right,
different house, but
right.
not very far from where my incident occurred.
Right, right. And so, um, basically, from what I remember, um, mom and I can't remember who I was with her. Do you remember? I know because I know that there was like at least one or two other people
I,
was there
I
with
don't
her.
remember. I just
But
remember what
but
she
so
saw.
yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, well, but no, so there was multiple. They all saw the same thing. So they were sitting on this couch, and they were watching this scary movie. There was, like I said, her and one or two other people, and they were sitting on the couch watching this scary movie. And she said, in this scary movie, there was this creature with like red hair and crazy eyes and like fangs and I guess it was like attacking people with some kind of like creature. It was a monster movie.
Hmm.
And she said that they were sitting there watching this, and she said all of a sudden, this same creature that they were watching on the TV, like pops up and stands up from behind the TV. She said it looked exactly like it looked in the show. She said it had the blood running down its mouth like it had just eaten something, and it it looked at them and then bolted out the front door. And she said they were screaming hysterically, freaking out. And and she was like, she was like, that it's very, very vividly. I mean, I remember she telling us that, whenever we were younger, and she said that's the story that Tina's testimony made her think about. And
Mm,
so it's just
yeah.
it's wild, man. Like, again, there's so many things that we grew up hearing,
Right.
and I feel like, now walking with God, I feel like, it adds some validity to it because it does make you aware of the spiritual realm, man. And
Yeah.
the thing about it is, for me, like, I remember I believed in all these stories because, I mean, the people who were telling us our own experiences. And I remember, again, like, our neighbors telling us like, oh, like this thing was like, there was so many people in our circles that were, having these same experiences or had these, I mean, how many people have heard ghost stories, and if you've never experienced it, yeah, you write it off.
Right.
But
Right.
it's like, man, like, kind of like you said, nobody questions, if you've had these experiences, you don't question whenever somebody is telling you their experience.
Right.
And I just, I kind of find it funny that even in those same pockets, like, you have people who still kind of question the existence of God, or what I mean, like, or the spiritual
Yeah.
realm. And it's just wild, man. Like,
It is, man. It is. And let me just say this too, that, I had a lot of experiences and people close to me had a lot of experiences. And I tend to, always default, despite my skepticism, despite my rationality. I believe people see something, whether it is what they think they saw or it's
right.
something else. I believe that most people are not just making up this stuff. I know I'm not making it up. And I always leave the room that, sure, yeah, it could have been something else. But I just, from what I saw and the way it made me feel, I think that it was X and not Y, but it very well could have been Y. But let me just say this, I got saved at 16 years old. And I know that despite that being over, 30 plus years ago, I know. Well, actually, no, it's not 30 plus years ago. I'm not that old, but it's
Yeah,
it's
I was
it's
like,
getting it'll be 30 years in a few years.
okay.
Um, but it's been a long time. It's been a long time, and I know beyond a doubt that I was truly saved and that the Holy Spirit came inside of me at 16 years old, because I know that my mind has been different ever since, and that I've felt different inside ever since. And, even though I still sin daily, even though I'm far from perfect and I still have a lot of growth ahead of me, I know for a fact that I am saved and that I've been saved and that, I'm sealed by God. And I could honestly say that since that has happened, I've not had any of those experiences happen to me since. Have there been times where, yeah, I maybe heard something, I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? Like, that I couldn't quite explain, little things that maybe have happened. Sure, there have been. I could think of one in particular, a few years after, we first got married. I remember looking for a hat of mine, like looking around my house for a hat that I wanted to wear, and I could not find it anywhere. And then I left and came back home, and the hat that I had been looking for was like sitting on the table. And I'm like, there is no way I would have missed that
Right.
hat. I was looking for it so diligently. And here it was, like as soon as I walk in the door, right in like my line of sight. And I'm like, and I asked, everyone, like, hey, did anyone put it there? Did someone find it? No, nobody did. Okay, that's kind of weird. You know what I mean? That's kind of weird. Is it also possible I just didn't see it? That's also possible. And there might have been one or two other instances where maybe there was a sound that, like, I'm in the house by myself, but it sounds like someone's walking, things like that. Very few and far between, though. Nothing like what we experienced growing up at all.
Right.
Nothing even close to it. And the only thing that I could attribute it to is, greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. And when you got God inside of you, then it doesn't mean you're not going to be attacked by demonic forces. There is that battle, but I think it's different. I think that it's different. Their ability to stay and torment you is limited, I think,
Well,
because you have God inside of you.
oh, well, 100%. I mean, Jesus said it, I think it was in Matthew, whenever he was like, basically, it, I'm going to cast these demons out you. And unless you, basically receive this, my spirit, you know what I mean? Or keep yourself clean, then more demons are going to come into you and they're just going to find your house well swept and whatever. And they're going to be more, whatever, so the point of
Right.
the message is like, yeah, if you get rid of all that demonic stuff and you don't allow the Holy Spirit to fill up that space, then it's just, they're vacant waiting for something else to occupy it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
And I will say that I kind of feel like I've had I- I've had different experiences, supernatural experiences, but I would say that there are things there where I would explain it as being, I'm still aware that something is different, something is off. But what I can tell you is it hasn't felt like an attack like it had in the past. You know what I mean? Like I didn't feel
Right.
like this thing was actually coming at me or affecting me, but I was able to be aware of things that are going on and kind of be like, man, like whereas before I very much, yeah, I guess maybe because I didn't have that the Holy Spirit there to fight that battle for me, and it was just kind of like me. I guess you can say I felt a lot more vulnerable in those
Hmm.
situations. But yeah, man, I can agree with that. That I
Yeah.
haven't really felt that. But yeah, man, it's just it really is the spiritual realm is around us, and it's crazy to me that people will are more inclined to acknowledge and accept the demonic side than they are the holy side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, like you never, I mean, I know that there are some people out there, but it's like, you don't really hear a whole lot of people. You don't hear as many people questioning the existence of the devil or demons or anything like that than as you do for God. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just
Right.
wild. I guess it's
It,
just
and it makes sense because I mean, you don't have to look far to find the worst kind of evil. And it's just so hard to believe that this is, not the product of some sort of evil
right.
spirits, entities, the devil, whatever you want to call it. It's there's just so much evil that exists, right? And so, yeah, so I think that's a big reason why people seem to, they seem to struggle with believing in God, but not the devil, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like God, it's like, the world it testifies that he's real, but you have all this negative, stuff that's happening that, is just so tangible and you feel so viscerally that, it makes you feel like, man, yeah, there's definitely something evil out there that definitely is real. But yeah, it's all real. At the end of the day, it's all real. And what I would
Oh
just
yeah.
say to anybody out there who feels like they are being haunted or they're being tormented or, they live in a haunted place, a haunted house, whatever, I would just say, call out to Jesus. You need Jesus, and Jesus will come into you, and that will change everything. The Holy Spirit inside of you will definitely, help you to fight those battles. And if it doesn't completely come to an end, it will definitely, be minimized. and you would definitely have the strength to deal with it because God will be, fighting the battle with you. And like we said at the beginning, even though the battle's won, it doesn't mean we don't have to fight it. We still have to fight it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, David still had to pull out his sling, you know what I mean? And slay Goliath, God gave him the victory, but he still had to fight. And I would I would also just say, generational curses are real. That's a real thing, and those things have to be broken. And I would say, in my personal opinion, that that's part probably of why we had some of the experiences we had. I know, mom
Mm,
has
that's
talked
true.
about how, her grandmother like cursed them, and for years and years and years. I mean, and like you said, people can be haunted. We moved all over the place. We moved like once a year, even all the way to Colorado. Got completely out of this area. So, we've lived in Louisiana, we've lived in Mississippi. You can say, yeah, same, same. You know what I mean? A lot of
Right.
similar history, a lot of similar background. We went all the way up north to Colorado and still had these experiences because it wasn't necessarily the places that we were staying. I think, we were haunted. We had, these things from family members dabbling with stuff. We have a grandmother who read tarot cards and played in the occult stuff. Now we ourselves personally weren't involved in the occult. And I want to make that clear. Like, you don't necessarily have to be involved in occult practices for, these kind of things to play a part in your life.
Right.
And I mean, I think that it just goes to show, it's like, whether you invite the evil in or not, it's there and it's real, and it can affect your life. So, all the more reason to give your life to Christ, and at least have him guiding you and guarding you, and protecting you and fighting these things with you. Otherwise, I mean, you're, basically in the lion's den at all times, and you don't know, like, the things that are circling you, in your naivety, just walking around thinking, oh, these things don't exist, and you're just,
Hmm.
you're just prey in the middle of a war of predators. It's crazy.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, very well said. Very well said. Well, I
Yeah,
think, at least for me anyway, those were the things that came to mind as we were listening to
yeah,
Gina give her testimony last week. I'm glad that we got a chance to get together and kind of just share our experiences because, I mean, I think we both shared some stuff with each other even that we had not shared before. But listening to her, definitely jogged some memories loose in our minds. So appreciate the
absolutely. And
conversation and being able to kind of review these with you.
yeah, and again, there's so many other stories, and I would just encourage everybody out there. I'm sure that many of you have had your own, stories or encounters with things that you didn't quite understand, or somebody, and so just food for thought, like, you know, in thinking about those things, like, where do you sit with it, and if you're willing to entertain the idea of those encounters with any kind of supernatural spirituality to be real, then how much more should we believe in God if you don't? Or how much easier should it be to explain to somebody or tell somebody about God if you have a scary thing that happens to you and you're like, guys, you're never gonna guess what happened to me. I heard things going bump in the night, but then whenever it comes time, like, you're afraid to tell somebody, hey, listen, you know what? The creator of heaven and earth loves you, and he wants you to save your soul and stop you from going to hell, and hell is real and demons are, it's like, just I don't know, that's just kind of what it makes me think, man. It's like, if it's easy to share the bad stuff, then how much more encouraged should we be to share the good news?
Amen, man. I totally agree. All right,
So
brother. Well, hey, what do you think?
I think that's a wrap for this one, man.
I think so too. I think so. So, I think that's it for this episode of the Walk Talk. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you haven't already, make sure to like and follow and subscribe to the show. And before you go, let us know what you think in the comments down below. God bless.
God bless.